Hey everyone, it's me, it's Hada back and Yom Tov. We've got a lovely sunny day today. I think this is summer mark 2. So I'm going to enjoy it because we don't know how many other sort of really nice summery days we're going to have. And I've tried to sort of look bright and sort of embrace the summertime and what have you as you do. And I guess it's a nice warm day out there, and I'm in here talking to you, so I'm trying to bring the sunshine in through the window and pass it on to you guys if you don't happen to have any sunshine around you today. So there you go. Take all the sunshine, take it with you and enjoy. Well, as you can see, I've had my hair's had a bit of a trim at the weekend, and alongside with the subject of today's video, which is divorce, you've got one side which is behaving really, really nicely, and then you've got the other side which isn't behaving at all well and is fluffing about and generally not behaving a lot like my ex-husband. That's my first husband, by the way, not the one I've got now. I've been asked a few times if I would talk about divorce and the effect it has on your mental health. But basically just to talk about divorce. And sadly, that's something that I know only too well about. But obviously only just the one time. But believe me, it was enough. It was more than enough. Now, I'm not going to mention any names or places or anything like that. But all I'm going to tell you is a bit about my story, and some of you may be able to relate to it. I'm going to tell you how I handled it, and how it affected me. And basically, I'll just start at the beginning, which is, in my opinion, I was married too young. I was married at the age of 20. I'd only known my ex-husband for a year and 3 weeks when we got married. We got engaged 6 months after we met, which was at uni. We met on the foundation course, which I was taking to lead on to do my degree. We started talking the very first day that we met. And I just looked at him as a potential male friend. I didn't realise he was looking on me as his first girlfriend. Now, keeping in mind that, and I'm going to be honest with you guys, I've only had 2 sexual partners my whole life. My first husband and my second husband. My first husband had never had any girlfriends before. I'd had quite a few boyfriends, but I think it's an American phrase, nobody ever got past first base with me. There's a British expression which you want to keep yourself tidy, and that's what I wanted. I wanted to keep myself tidy until I met a man that I thought I would, definitely want to marry and have a family with. So that was the case, and anyway, everything seemed to go fine. There was a few ifs and buts going on around the wedding. I mean, I must admit his parents never really did like me very much. I know that my dad didn't care for him. He said I could definitely do better, and there was something about him that he didn't like. But then again, who can't say that they haven't had parents who haven't liked your prospective boyfriends or partners or anything like that? So it was quite common. My mother liked him, but then again, he was a male with various parts, so she was bound to. I didn't take him around to the house for quite a long time, actually, because she made it past him. And he came and told me straight away, and that ensued in a blazing row. So I kept my distance from her for quite some time. Anyway, everything seemed to go fine. You know, wedding day seemed to go fine. He seemed to go fine. And then it was by the end of the wedding day, I noticed he was starting to get snappy at me. He never got snappy at me before. We couldn't afford a honeymoon. So we ended up going back to his parents' home, where, you know, things sort of started to go downhill quite quickly. His mother informed me that she has had grave doubts about his sexuality for a long, long time, which I must admit, it didn't really gel with me at the time. She was just glad that her son had, eventually met someone and got married. She didn't really approve of me, but it was a case of at least he had someone. So I was better than a bad job. Well, it just seemed that as the days and the weeks went on, he seemed to develop this snappiness with me that hadn't appeared before. I discovered, I know you're saying a year, how could you not have known in a year? But he was more or less very well behaved, apart from a lot of jealousy. I had a lot of male friends. I had a lot of friends. I had equally the amount of male friends as I had female friends. But he seemed to be very jealous of all of them. And I made the biggest mistake that you can ever make. And that was that, apart from my best friend at the time, I dropped all my friends for him because he didn't like them. And because I loved him and I didn't want to lose him, I was actually looking for security, which wasn't one of the best reasons to go into a marriage. As you already know, I didn't really get the best start in life, and I didn't exactly have role models with regard to marriage and how family life should be, because it was more or less chaotic. And I just thought, somebody wants to marry me, I'm just going to grab onto that. When you're fed with the first 20 years of your life that you're worthless and you're ugly and you're this and you're that, for someone to show an interest in you, you grab onto that. A bit like a life buoy in the middle of the ocean. Well, I made the huge mistake of dropping all my friends for him. And can I please advise anybody watching this who has met someone and already has good friends around them, the worst mistake you can make is to drop your friends. Because if things go wrong, you really need them. And I must admit, those friends went and they weren't happy about it and told me I was making a mistake, and I'd rue the day and it would be, I told you so. And of course, at the time, I was completely blind. I just didn't want to hear it. Oh, it would be different, it would be great, things to work out, all that sort of thing. Well, he made it clear that he didn't want children, he didn't want any attention being taken from him. Whereas I thought I didn't want children, but as time got on, I realised I did. And we actually separated twice before I fell pregnant with my daughter. We'd reconciled one weekend and he was very, very nice to me. And as you know, 2 and 2 makes 4. and he no sooner got what he wanted than he started with his snappy, nasty behaviour again. And he would do things that would make me question myself. You know, was I going crazy? I would tell him that he'd said things or done things, and then he would say, I didn't do that. You did that. Don't you remember? And, you know, and I didn't. I really didn't. He would tell me that I'd said and done things, and to my knowledge, I'd never done it. But he was so convincing that I just took what he said as read. Anyway, I went on to, I found out I was pregnant, and I deliberately reconciled with him because I didn't want to be a single mum. He wasn't exactly happy about it, but it was a case, right, well, we're just going to have to get on with it. Of course, my side of the family couldn't care less. His side of the family didn't have any grandchildren, so of course they were, especially his mother was overjoyed that she was going to be a grandmother. He wasn't supportive when I was having my daughter, and after she was born, it was just basically ignored her. He would make a fuss of her when his parents came round, but it was all for show. I, of course, was absolutely besotted with my little girl. I really was. I was absolutely besotted with her. And that was the start, I think, of the sort of the first nails in the coffin of the marriage, because he wanted my attention, but I wanted to give my attention to my new baby. And that was basically that. When she was 2.5, we'd have fights and then reconcile, and have really bad fights again and then reconcile. And I always made sure that there was never any words said in front of my little girl. She thought that Mummy and Daddy were fine. When I'd been crying, and if she asked why I was crying, I would just tell her that I had a headache. Anyway, I went on to miscarry twin girls at 5 months. And then I lost another baby the year after that. And then the year after that, I got pregnant with my son. And by the time my son was 2.5, it was evident that he was showing some problems, which ended up turning out to be autism. My daughter had eye problems, and as you know, my daughter's now blind. So I had 2 children with disabilities to look after. And I'll be the first one to tell you that I did not give my husband all the attention that he deserved, or that he should have had if I'd done my 50% of the marriage. I was always faithful to him. I never strayed. I was completely taken up in my children, because even though they're grown people now, they are my life. They have my heart. They are first, last, and everything. Literally, my first, my last, my everything. That's what my children are. And when we rowed and what have you, he would say, why can't you put me first? And I would say, but how can you ask me to do that when these two both have different needs? I have to be there for them. It's not just me sitting playing with them. There's hospital appointments, doctor's appointments, psychologists, psychiatrists, the whole 9 yards, opticians, ophthalmologists, eye surgeons. It would be literally one appointment after another. There was never a week went by where there wasn't appointments to be attended. Anyway, the final sort of nails in the coffin happened when I found out that I had not only did I have Graves' disease, but I had a hot nodule indicating thyroid cancer. And that was what my real father died from. And Graves' disease is an inherited condition. I was very ill. We'd gone away to Spain on holiday. I spent most of the holiday feeling very ill. Came home, sorted out doctors and what have you. He was extremely inattentive. Even when the doctors and the specialists told him there was something wrong, he scoffed at it. He said, "Oh, you've now got a medical term for it being a Rottweiler." He was just totally uninterested. I had to have radiotherapy, which meant I had to be in isolation for 3 weeks. I literally begged to have the treatment done at home. So they allowed me to do that as long as I kept to strict guidelines, which I did, which meant no contact with anyone within 12 feet. I knew I would get throat ulcers, mouth ulcers, I would get high temperatures, but that's all part of, having this treatment done. And hell on earth is looking at your children and not being able to touch them. He'd promised me faithfully he would look after them, that he would, make their meals on time, that he would play with them. He broke all those rules. He fed them when he felt like eating. I'm very glad that my daughter was, 11 at the time, and she could make little snacks, not involving a kettle or the microwave or anything like that, but she could make little snacks for herself and her brother. And she would come upstairs and sit, 15 feet away from me and talk to me and beg to come and sit beside me. And it wasn't a very nice time. And I heard him on the phone to his work one day telling them how he was exhausted looking after me and the 2 children, and that was the straw that broke the camel's back for me. I thought, I cannot live with this man anymore. He's lying through his teeth. He is selfish. He's manipulative. He's making me doubt my sanity sometimes. I'd gone back onto antidepressants by this point. There was a couple of times that I honestly didn't think I wanted to live anymore. That's how I was really feeling, that I was so low and I just didn't want to be with him anymore. It was a mistake. The whole thing, a 20-year marriage, was a mistake. But he'd really alienated the children. He was snapping at them all the time. He'd really get angry with them for no reason. He wouldn't allow them to have their toys out around him. So whenever they saw him, they just used to scatter. But they were allowed to play with him when he initiated it. And they had to stick by his rules. And if they didn't learn the rules quickly enough, then he would get angry with them. And I used to think, this is no good. This is just no way to be around children. But what I didn't realise, and it wasn't until a good time later, was where he took up the hobby of watching wrestling. And he used to, and I guess I used to laugh at it, and it didn't really dawn on me that he used to go on about how handsome the men were and how beautiful their bodies were, how well toned and things like that. We would occasionally have parties. This is well before I took ill. And he always said we had to have what's called tarts and tramps, or tarts and vicars parties, where, either the women would dress up as a hobo, a tramp, like a bit of a ragamuffin, dirty, unkempt, dressed in rags, that sort of thing. And the men would dress up as women. That was the party he loved. And I've got to tell you, he had a better hand at makeup than I did. He looked a lot better in stockings than I did. And I was a lot slimmer then. And he certainly wore my clothes better than I did. He would put on my bra, stuff it full of tissue paper, and stand preening himself in the mirror. But the thing is, he wouldn't take the clothes off at the end of the night or wash the makeup off. He'd sort of keep them on until the following day and still walk around in them and things like this. But I've got to be honest with you, it didn't click in my head. It really didn't, that there was an underlying issue. Anyway, I decided at the end of the day, when I was very, very ill and very, very low, and when I found out he wasn't looking after the children properly, I said, that is it. That is the finish. I am not staying with you any longer. And he said, you won't leave me. There's no way you can leave me, because, you know, there'll be no money and your lifestyle will change and all of that. Well, to cut a long story short, he set it, because the house we were living in originally belonged to his parents. He sort of was given it from them, so I didn't have a share in it. And, you know, I didn't push to get my share of the house, because I thought it was unfair of me to rob him of his family home, which I now realise was a huge mistake. But it is what it is. I ended up having to take emergency housing at New Year's Eve, because that's when he said, that's it, you're gone, go. I eventually found a home for us, not in the best area of town. And it really was pretty awful for the first 5-6 months after I left him. I was told I could get a quickie divorce through, I think it was something like, you know, irreconcilable differences. And he wouldn't sign the papers. He refused. So my 6-month quickie divorce ended up lasting for 4.5 years. He dragged out every single thing. He would never be in to receive papers. He would not answer solicitors' letters. My lawyer would send him letter after letter after letter with regard to maintenance for me, maintenance for the children. He left every letter unanswered, and he dragged it out and out. And I was still on speaking terms with his mother at this point, and I said, why is he doing this? And she says, because he doesn't believe that you will leave him. He believes that you will crawl on your knees and beg him to take you back. And I said, well, please inform him not to hold his breath, because, you know, look, I said, tell him if it's going to speed things up, he doesn't have to give me any money at all. Even though, and I could prove that the first 6 years of our marriage, I supported him. I'd gone out to work. While the 4 years I was at uni, I worked. The first 2 years after uni, I worked full-time and supported him. He didn't work. He didn't actively look for work. And it was a friend of mine who was working for the government offices, and she said, there are jobs coming up. Shall I get him an application form? And, you know, I filled out one. He filled out one. He didn't want to. He ended up getting the job, and I ended up getting the job as well. But then I found out I was pregnant. So, of course, couldn't take the job because of me having a baby. Anyway, after 4.5 years, the divorce came through. But by this time, I'd managed to move myself and the children into a nicer home. And then move them to an even nicer home. And it was lovely. We had fantastic neighbours. But as my disability got worse and worse, that house was not fit for purpose. So we ended up moving to the home I've got now, which is designed for disabled people like myself, wheelchairs. It's a beautiful home. It's a very, very happy home. I met my now husband a few years back. We were together a long time before we got married. And we are now one great big happy family. My ex-husband decided to disown the children when they chose to be with me, as did his parents. And they have not seen either of the children in, it's got to be 18, 19 years. So they've missed the children growing up. And I've since found out that my ex-father-in-law has now died. I thought I'd feel grief, but I don't. I don't know what's happened with my ex-mother-in-law yet. But to be quite honest with you, I don't care, because of the way they disrespected my children, who'd never harmed them, ever. Had never done anything wrong to them, but loved them as their grandparents. There wasn't any, I couldn't find any help out there for me. Not at first. I'd managed to retain a couple of friends who helped me with the first house move and what have you. But my social circle was literally like that big, very small. But, you know, like everything else, people drift. And I do have some friends now, don't see them very often, because they like me to go to their homes. I can't get into their homes because they're not wheelchair friendly. So for them to have to come a good way away to come and visit me isn't ideal for them. So it's like everything else, things change, don't they? But what I wanted to tell you was the basic message is this, and I know this is going to be half an hour long, and I apologise for that. But what I wanted to say is this. There are things that happen in life that are immensely stressful. There's death, divorce, and house moves are the three top ones. Within the first 5 years, I had the divorce and 2 house moves. Plus, I had issues with children, still ongoing, which I had to handle on my own. I had to rely on myself. There wasn't really anyone to really hash it out with. I just sat on my own in the evenings with my cigarette and a glass of wine, and I'd watch some TV or I'd read a book and learn for the first time in 20 years to sleep by myself. And it was strange, but I got used to it. And you do get used to things. And I don't know if there is, I mean, I know there's more, you know, help out there now for newly divorced people. But 20 years ago, there wasn't really much. And you just had to learn to rely on your own resources, which I did. Because, you know, I'm not as resourceful as I used to be, obviously stuck in this chair. But I'm normally quite good at thinking on my feet and thinking far ahead. So I just think that I handled it the best way I could. I was suffering from depression at the time. I did feel very, very low in patches, but it really was a case then of having to say to myself, you have 2 young children who are up there asleep and they are relying on you. You have to pull yourself together. Just put a smile on your face. Come home when they're at school and bawl your eyes out. But when they're at home, let them see a happy, smiling mummy and give them a rock to cling to. And that's basically how I handled my divorce. And the best advice I can give anyone is don't lose your friends. Don't let go of them, because if things go wrong, you are going to need them. When people offer you help, take it. Don't be stubborn and say, no, I'll do it myself, like I did. And don't let future ex-husbands walk all over you. Don't be sentimental. Look at it for what it is. It's the end of a chapter. And take out what you put into it. Get your share. There is nothing wrong in that. You take what is owed to you that you put into that marriage. Or whether it's a civil partnership, or whether it's just a man and a woman living together with no legality. If you've done your end of providing furniture and food and paying for bills and, maintaining a home, you make sure that you get what you are due. Don't sit there and just say, oh, look, I just want an end to it, please. I'll sign anything, I'll do anything, please. Because it doesn't work. It really doesn't work. It's great if you can have an amicable divorce, and I know they are possible. But when it's a nasty, long, drawn-out affair, no. It's not a case of cutting your losses. You have to get what is owed to you, because you're going to need it. But most of all, you are going to need your friends around you to support you. And I didn't have many at all. I think I had 2. And they couldn't always be there. So learn from me and my daft mistakes. Anyway, I've just seen the time there and it's been a long one. I apologise for that. I just wanted to say one quick thing. Thank you again to everybody who came and supported Friday night and the spooky session. And thank you for the feedback saying you enjoyed the story. I found about half a dozen stories this week. I just don't know which one to choose from. And I have put up a poll on my Twitter page. It's on for another day, I think. So go on there and have a look at the poll and vote. And what I'll do is, even the ones that don't, isn't the winning one, I'll still go ahead and maybe one week say, this week I'm going to do one on this topic to make other people happy. Because not everybody likes anything to do with the paranormal. Some people like curses, some people like vampires, some people like voodoo, things like that, which I've only been covering ghosts so far. So I just wanted everybody to know that I am going to try and cater to everybody's needs. Okay, so thank you very much for listening to me. I hope I've been able to help someone, and I want to wish you a very much enjoyable rest of your day. I love you all. Thank you so much to everybody who is in the Haven, because I do love you guys. You are in here with me now, and I don't know where I'd be without you. So take care, and if I don't see you before, I'll see you on Friday.